Thank you, honorable members. And I'm sorry for not bowing to you. I'm sure you all understand. Order. Order, honorable members, flowers and all. Honorable members, before we proceed with today's business, I wish to announce that I have, in terms of Rules 334, designated Mr. A.H.M. Papo as Parliamentary Councillor to the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa with the effects from the 3rd of May, 2023. Congratulations to you, honorable member. In absentia, I don't see the honorable member. Lastly, honorable members, order, Honorable Mcebisi and Honorable Monli. I know. Lastly, the vacancy which occurred in the National Assembly owing to the resignation of Ms. D. van der Walt has been filled with effect from the 1st of May 2023 by the nomination of Mr. J.F. Smale. The member has made and subscribed the oath in the Speaker's office yesterday. I welcome you, honorable members. Don't take chances. It's not his first term here. It's his second one, by the way. Honorable Smale, raise your hand so that people can see where you are. He's not here. First day. No. Thank you. Honorable members. Honorable members, we congratulated you, Honorable Papo, in your absence. Congratulations. Thank you, Honorable. Order now. Shall we proceed, Honorable members? I think people feel there's freedom a bit. I don't know what's happening. There's a bit of space. It's airy. I don't know. I think so. Yeah, the only item on today's order paper is questions addressed to the President. There are 4 supplementary questions on each question. Parties have given an indication of which questions their members wish to pose a supplementary on. Adequate notice was given to parties for this purpose. This was done to facilitate participation of members who are connecting to the sitting through the virtual platform. The members who will pose supplementary questions will be recognized by the presiding officer. In allocating opportunities for supplementary questions, the principle of fairness, amongst others, has been applied. If a member who is supposed to ask a supplementary question through the virtual platform is unable to do so due to technological difficulties, the party whip on duty will be allowed to ask the question on behalf of their member. When all the supplementary questions have been answered by the President, we will proceed to the next question on the question paper. Honorable members, the first question has been asked by the Honorable K.E. Magak. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker and honorable members. As I indicated in my reply to the State of the Nation address and debate on the 16th of February of this year, the Minister of Electricity, as I said, will be responsible for overseeing all aspects of the electricity crisis that we are going through. The Minister of Electricity is responsible for driving the various actions being coordinated by the National Energy Crisis Committee to end load shedding as a matter of urgency. As I said then, matters of energy policy remain the responsibility of the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. As for the issue of parliamentary oversight of energy policy matters, Parliament is required in terms of the Constitution and also its own rules to develop mechanisms to ensure that all executive organs of state in the national sphere of government are accountable to it and to maintain oversight of the exercise of the National Executive Authority. It is up to Parliament to decide how to exercise its oversight role with respect to matters within the jurisdiction of the Minister of Electricity. The Minister is overseeing the full and speedy implementation of the Energy Action Plan to ensure that the severity and the frequency of load shedding is reduced in the immediate term and brought to an end within the shortest possible time. Following his appointment, Minister Ramaphosa conducted a diagnostic assessment of Eskom's installed generation capacity, resulting in the identification of a set of critical interventions to maximize energy availability factor of the generation fleet. The ministry engaged a wide spectrum of stakeholders, including industry, various businesses, labor, original equipment manufacturers, and the diplomatic community, who have all pledged their support for strategic interventions to reduce the intensity and frequency of load shedding. The preoccupation of the minister is to improve the performance of the existing Eskom baseload fleet, maximize performance and output of peaking stations, and to reduce demand through an aggressive demand-side management program. This work is being undertaken alongside measures that are being put in place to sustainably and urgently increase the construction of new generation capacity, which is currently underway. The reforms that we have already implemented have resulted in a significant increase in investment in new generation projects, with many more in the pipeline and a number of others that are soon going to be put on acquisition and in the end will also be implemented. A great deal of work is being done in this regard, much as we are going through a challenging period with continued load shedding. I do believe that the end should be in sight soon, as all these efforts bear fruit. And fruit they will bear because we now have a very focused type of attention on precisely what needs to be done, cutting across what the management at ESCOM is doing, the board is doing, the minister is doing, and all the other relevant cooperating ministers, mineral and energy, as well as public enterprises. So all hands are on deck in as far as dealing with our electricity challenge is concerned. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable President. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable K.E. Makak.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Honorable President, for that comprehensive response. A follow-up question: while the Minister of Electricity was appointed with the view that he would expedite the government's response to load shedding and energy insecurity under the National State of Disaster on Electricity, which the government ultimately revoked following the legal action against its rationality, is the Minister of Electricity still empowered to fast-track the government's energy action plan in the absence of National State of Disaster on Electricity? And what is the Minister of Electricity's new approach to solve electricity crisis following the government's withdrawal of the National State of Disaster, given that load shedding is likely to reach stage 7 and 8 in this winter season? Thank you, President.
The President. Thank you, Honorable Makaka.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The Minister of Electricity has his work cut out, and the finalization, which is due to be announced very shortly, of actually all the mandate matters that he has to attend to, set out precisely what he's meant to do. The issue of the state of disaster was going to be an added tool to enhance the implementation of the address that needs to be given with regard to ending load shedding. And when that was withdrawn, it did not mean that the minister does not have the tools and the capability to be able to do his work. What we have been in the process of doing is to look at the tasks that relate to generation in the Electricity Regulation Act, and those tasks that need to be executed by the Minister of Electricity, and they vary, or they include matters of generation. They also include the identification of the type of energy source that we need, and thereafter cooperating with the Minister of Minerals and Energy for the procurement process, which once it has been procured, the Minister of Electricity will then ensure that it is implemented and deal with matters such as the financial close, and also ensure that once there is financial close and it is implemented, the grid or transmission is ready. And in this regard, we'll also be working very closely with other institutions such as NERSA. And indeed, in all this, he'll also be cooperating very closely with the Minister of Public Enterprises. So if there ever was to be intergovernmental cooperation where we get rid of all the silos, this whole task of dealing with electricity in our country is going to be a great example, because that is precisely what has started to happen now. The cooperation between the Minister of Electricity, the Minister of Mineral Energy, Resources and Energy rather, and the Minister of Public Enterprises is precisely what we want to see in government, where all the silos are broken down and the ministers work in a very cooperative spirit, and that is exactly what is underway now. So the Disaster Management Act process was going to be an aid, an enabler, but that having been foregone, other various instruments of a legislative nature are in place to enhance the work of the Minister of Electricity. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I thank you, Honorable President. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable W.J. Boshoff.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much, and Honorable President. If I read the question correctly, it actually consisted out of two elements. How will you, the Honorable President, convince the public that the location of the Minister of Electricity in your own presidency is not an attempt to shift oversight on energy policy away from Parliament? And then something about timeframes. Now, you said that Parliament should actually devise its own mechanisms for oversight, but just last week, your own governing party voted down an attempt to provide exactly such a mechanism. So I would like to know what is the actual plan that would be acceptable then. And in addition to that, I would like to know, you appointed the Minister of Electricity, and clearly you must have had a good idea about what he should do. And yet, even today, you told
Order,
this
you have
House...
exceeded your time for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you did raise your question, but
Actually, I would
Honorable
just like
President,
the President to answer the original questions. How are we going to, what measures will be acceptable to him and the governing party?
thank you. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I did say in my original response that really it is up to Parliament on how they would like, Parliament would like the accounting process to happen in relation to the Minister of Electricity. We have said very clearly that the executive is accountable to Parliament, and it therefore behoves on this Parliament to work out those mechanisms that would also include accountability of the Minister of Electricity. Locating the ministry in the presidency does not by any means diminish the issue of accountability. Minister Ramaphosa is by no means the only minister whose work is lodged in the presidency. We've got 3 ministers who are accountable to Parliament, whose work is lodged in the presidency. And so therefore, putting the ministry in the presidency, and particularly the minister to be driving the process of the Energy Action Plan from the presidency through the crisis committee that was created, is meant to enhance precisely what work needs to be done. With regards to the mechanism broadly, as I said and I repeat, that needs to be discussed by Parliament, including the matter of the accountability of the presidency. It is my information that this matter is under discussion now in Parliament, and I encourage that that discussion should ensue and Parliament should make its own decisions in this regard. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I thank you, Honorable President. The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable N. Singh.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable President, saying that the Minister of Electricity has his work cut out for him is an understatement. Really, all 3 ministers have the work cut out for them. And I hope that work doesn't include them having serious differences in the cabinet room and not dealing with the matter at hand. I see they are shaking hands. But having said that, Honorable President, recently the North Gauteng High Court in a full bench held that all hospitals, clinics, schools, and police stations should be exempt from load shedding. And this is something you've said in the State of the Nation address. The Minister of Electricity said that. So I cannot understand how, Honorable President, that this decision of a full bench is being appealed by this government, given the fact that water is required by everybody in our land. And when electricity is not available, water pump stations don't work. And given that we need police stations, we need hospitals to sustain life, and we need to also sustain our economy. I see Honorable Premier Windy also said it'll be too costly. Now, can we put a cost to these vital things that the society requires, Honorable President? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. The President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Yes, the court did take that decision. And clearly, the view that we've taken in government is we do need to deal with the practicality of that decision. Because the whole process of load shedding is really to manage the grid. Because when a number of units are not available to generate energy, you could be tempted to drive those remaining units, and you could drive them to a point of breakdown. And you therefore need to manage it. And so the engineers tell me that you need to limit them overheating. I use a colloquial term. And if they were to overheat because you're driving them all at one go to generate the electricity at its maximum, then the grid could collapse. So you therefore need to feed the electricity in a number of areas on possibly a sequential basis, and switch off other areas and switch other areas on until you reach a stage where all units are then able to give you the electricity we need. And this is possibly what maybe we don't all understand, because load shedding is the last resort. If we ever wanted that there should be no load shedding, the grid would collapse, because a number of units, for reasons that we have dealt with, are not at the time available. And as we speak now, the availability factor for electricity has gone down below 50%. So much as we want that electricity must be generated for all and sundry, all at one go, it is just practically, engineering-wise, not possible. And it is for this reason that government wants to shed light through this whole process on the impracticality of doing all that. And yet, the more practical way is to do your load shedding in sequence, where you are able to shed load for a number of areas. Ideally, I would personally want all those hospitals, schools to be exempt. But from an engineering point of view, I am told that it is practically impossible to do. So now we are faced with a court judgment and the impracticality of it all. So the process of then approaching the court through an appeal process is to bring to bear a better understanding, so that there can be understanding of the engineering aspects and the impracticality aspects of it all. And by the way, it is not being done in an arrogant way, in a way where we're trying to say second guess the court. It is actually being done to ensure that we save the grid, because otherwise it would collapse if we were to implement that judgment in full. I hope that makes it clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, let me add, Honorable Speaker, you alluded in the first part of your question that they've got their work cut out, and you are absolutely right. The ministers have their work cut out, each one of them. And as I said during State of the Nation, as well as I said during the reply to the debate, these three areas of work are all very critical to our electricity architecture. And I outlined precisely what each is doing. And now, as all of them face up to the challenges that lie ahead, they are finding that, in fact, they have to cooperate even more. And that is why there are no fights in cabinet. There is no turf war, which is being, bandied around in the media. They are cooperating well, and they know at what point they need to talk to each other to move things forward. So I'm very happy with the architecture that we've put in place. It is working, and it will continue to work. Believe you me. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable President. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable W.M. Thring.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Mr. President, the power crisis is devastating households and businesses, eroding the nation's economic growth prospects, disrupting power supply chains, and stoking inflation. Public anger is understandably growing around the government's inability to deal with the crisis. The Electricity Minister, Ramaphosa, has warned that South Africans could face a cold winter that may include stage 8 power cuts. This is unprecedented, with stage 6 load-shedding having 8 hours or so of cuts, stage 8 up to 12 hours, and stage 9 and 10 too ghastly to contemplate. Now, Mr. President, the North Gauteng High Court found that it is clear that whatever, and I quote, it is clear that whatever the president and his cabinet ministers averred, the consequences of policy decisions resulted in the current need by Eskom to continue to implement various stages of load shedding. In other words, Mr. President, you and your cabinet failed to keep the lights on. Now, taking the public into your confidence, would the president agree that government's attempts to solve the energy crisis have failed spectacularly? And what responsibility and further initiatives, if any, do you as the head of state and cabinet take for the energy and resultant economic quagmire our country faces? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Thring. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I deny completely that we have completely failed in our attempts to deal with this crisis. We continue to take a number of measures and actions on a continuous basis. When I stood here and announced the Energy Action Plan, it was welcomed by all and sundry as being a very rational plan that would address our energy crisis. We hadn't then foreseen that our energy availability factor would decline further than where it was at the time. We hadn't then foreseen that 3 units of Kusile would just collapse. We hadn't foreseen that a number of others in other power stations, Creel and all that, would also collapse. That is something from an engineering point of view had not been foreseen. But the measures that we've been putting in place, as I said in our Energy Action Plan, was to embark on new generation. New generation is underway right now of a variety of sources. One of the things I also said in 2019, standing here in this parliament, actually it was in the State of the Nation, I said we needed emergency power. And we needed emergency power of some 3,000 megawatt, I said. And that process got underway. It has been stopped by interventions that are completely out of government's hands. Stopped by either various non-governmental organizations who've taken the process to court, environmental issues have been raised, and that is what has put the brakes on what I would call immediate emergency power that could have been brought to bear. And I still say today, what South Africa needs right now is emergency energy that we can bring in. Other countries have done so, and I've been to a few countries on our continent. They have done so. They brought in ships that are able to generate energy and immediately solve their energy challenges and problems. And I do believe that that is the way to go right now, to add those megawatts that we don't have. while we wait for the construction of the other renewable energy sources, as well as the revamping or the repair of our baseload coal-fired power stations that are being worked on after years of no maintenance. And part of our plan is also to work on demand management. Part of our plan is to also work on rooftop solar installations. Now, those are interventions that are going to help to reduce the pressure on the grid and add more energy sources to our electricity overall landscape. So those initiatives, which have been validated by many, are underway. We're repairing our power stations, we're maintaining them. And when you maintain the power stations, you have to take it out of the grid. And sometimes it goes on for much longer than you wanted. So we're dealing with big machinery here, and we're dealing with suppliers that are big original equipment manufacturers that manufacture for the whole world. And they don't wait in line just for South Africa. So when we have a generator that is broken down, we wait in line. But the initiatives we are taking is that we will add other sources of energy, which we are doing. And soon there will be a further round of procurement that is going to add more megawatts. So all that is ongoing, and we aim, as this reaches fruition, to bring load shedding under control and to an end. And that is precisely what all these three ministers are doing. Ministers of Public Enterprises is dealing with the restructuring of Eskom, so that we have a transmission company, so that that transmission company is then able to put in investments in the transmission lines so that they can absorb new energy generation. Minister of Electricity focuses on generation, and Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources focuses on the policy, the procurement process, and all that. So that is the architecture that we've put in place. And we are not sleeping on the job, and we are hoping that all these efforts will lead to the solution that the people of South Africa want to see. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Honorable the President. Honorable members, before I proceed to the next question, may I just make a plea that those who are raising supplementary questions, please avoid making long statements before you ask your question. I think I've been why? Because I've been very lenient and allowed you to go way beyond the time allocated for that. If we could avoid it, please, it will be better for all of us. Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Thank you. Question number 8 has been asked by the Honorable, the Leader of the Opposition. The Honorable, the President.
Honorable Speaker and honorable members, I've not been presented with any evidence of members of the cabinet or other senior government officials alleged to be involved in corruption at Eskom. Anyone who does have such evidence should provide that information to the relevant authorities so that a thorough investigation of all credible allegations can be conducted. There are institutions whose job it is to investigate these matters, as they have the legal mandate, they have the personnel, and they also have the capacity to be able to investigate all these matters. Significant progress has been made by law enforcement agencies. Eskom and other relevant government departments have also made progress in addressing crime and corruption at the entity. Various measures have been taken by the Department of Public Enterprises and reported to Parliament regarding the implementation of the recommendations of the State Capture Commission. Coal supply agreements and construction contracts with a value of approximately 11 billion rand have been cancelled by Eskom. Eskom also initiated litigation that resulted in coal supply agreements to an approximate value of 3.7 billion being declared invalid. Further losses of approximately 10 billion rand to Eskom were prevented by setting aside other coal supply agreements and constructors' contracts. Eskom is pursuing claims with a value of approximately 4.8 billion against suppliers and former directors of Eskom. The utility has recovered approximately 2 billion rand unlawfully paid by Eskom to service providers. The Special Investigating Unit has referred some 5,464 matters to Eskom for disciplinary proceedings against employees for their alleged failure to submit financial declarations, declare or get approval for doing work outside of Eskom. There are pending criminal cases or referrals to the National Prosecuting Authority by law enforcement in at least 125 instances, and a further 65 referrals to the Asset Forfeiture Unit relating to Eskom. At least 25 former senior executives at Eskom have been included in a database of individuals dismissed for their involvement in state capture and corruption at Eskom. All this demonstrates that government is proactively investigating and taking action against crime and corruption at Eskom. The law enforcement agencies themselves will, in addition, continue to investigate any credible information that is provided to it, because that is their job and that is their specialty, and they have the capacity to do so. And as I've often said here, let us allow those institutions to do their work and to do it without any fear, favor, or prejudice. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable the President. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. President. And with respect, I think you're confusing criminal liability with political liability. We know, you know, and the rest of the country knows that it is ANC cadres who are responsible for the corruption at Eskom. In your first State of the Nation address, Mr. President, you said, and I quote, "We will intervene decisively to stabilize SOE. The recent action we've taken at Eskom to strengthen governance, root out corruption, and restore its financial position is just the beginning," end quote. On the 4th of June last year, the then CEO informed the police and state security officials that members of your cabinet are involved in the corrupt cartels at Eskom. And these are serious allegations. On the 5th of July, he informed Minister Godon and your NSA, Minister Mufamadi, about these ministers who are involved in corruption. Yet it now appears that you have done absolutely nothing in your cabinet to hold these individuals accountable. We cannot sit here while R1 billion a month is being looted from Eskom, and you're trying to go after the small fish when the big fish are sitting around your cabinet table. Mr. President, why have you not made any efforts to identify who those cabinet ministers are and hold them accountable? Thank you.
I thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Steenhuisen's last word is quite instructive, because he says I should identify. The identification of anyone with regards to, say, criminal activity and corruption has to be done through an investigative process. Someone, an institution has to investigate that. And I could easily say, Mr. Steenhuisen, you stole my other beautiful tie yesterday. But someone has to be able to say, somebody has to be able to say, let us investigate whether indeed Mr. Steenhuisen stole the president's beautiful tie. Because if I go on just a whim and a story that, yes, you stole my tie, without the evidence, without corroboration, without the investigation, then I'm flying on very thin ice. Because in the end, it's a beautiful tie. In the end, the process of investigation involves those agencies that are well adept, that are well capacitated, whose job is to investigate. And we as politicians can deal with whatever rumor. And it's very easy to make a rumor that so-and-so, or an allegation that so-and-so is involved in this and that. But where's the evidence to back that up? And that is why in my initial reply, I said, those with evidence, those with information, those with full knowledge must go to the investigation institutions. They must go and report there. And that, I'm very interested. I'm very interested. Just as interested as I would be if I hear that you've stolen my tie, I would say, yes, let that be investigated. And that's precisely what I'm also saying here and now. That if there is any information that anyone in the executive has been involved in corrupt activities or theft, let the matter be investigated. And that is why I say without institutions who operate without favor, without prejudice, should be the ones that we put our trust in to be able to investigate such activities, rather than to deal with innuendo, rather than to deal with rumor, rather than to deal with allegations. I cannot possibly be able to lead on the basis of whims and innuendo and just stories that are bandied around. I need to deal with real evidence. And I've said over and over again, and the members on the opposition have always said, President, do this, charge this one. I arrest somebody, take them to court. I don't do that. And even if I wanted to do that, even if I wanted to do that, even if I wanted to do that and had those dictatorial ambitions, the rule of law that we have and the constitution that we have in this country would never allow me to do that. So in the end, it has to be done through due process of the law. It has to be done through the institutions that we have put in place. Because if the president then starts investigating his own ministers, then it basically means that we don't need the police. The president is the policeman himself. Then it means that we don't need criminal investigations because the president is the criminal investigator himself. And we cannot run a banana republic in South Africa over things like that. We cannot. That we will never do. So, and I repeat, anybody who has information, who has evidence about anyone, be it a cabinet minister, be it whoever, should come forward and put the information before the law enforcement agencies, and they must then investigate, because they are the ones who investigate these matters. So, Honorable Speaker, I must say with respect, I'm not able to help Honorable Steenhuisen in this regard. The identification of people who might be involved must be done by the police and not by someone who does not have the capability or the expertise to do so. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable President. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable JCN Mkhwanazi. What's happening there, Honorable Member? Take your seat. Then exit. Honorable Mkhwanazi.
When we play.
Honorable Mkhwanazi, please proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, His Excellency the President, for the detailed educating response. Mr. President, considering that and reiterate allegations that senior politicians linked to the African National Congress are involved in plundering and perpetuating of corruption in ESCOM remains dubious and untested, as the rate has failed to reveal those senior politicians has required to do so by SCOPA. Mr. President, Mr. President.
Order, Honorable Member.
Mr. President, has the government ever considered strengthening capacity of law enforcement agencies to assist ESCOM in unearthing corruption and reduce the utilities dependence on private funded investigators headed by people with close ties to apartheid regime, and this is a threat to our democracy. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Mkhwanazi. The Honorable the President.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, thank you. Yes, Honorable Mkhwanazi, yes, the corruption and the malfeasance that has been going on in ESCOM has always been a matter of concern to us. And a great deal of work has been underway, as I alluded to in my original response, with a number of people being identified, a number of them being arrested, being charged, either being disciplined or dismissed, and with monies being claimed. We are committed as government to assist ESCOM as much as we possibly can. And to this end, we've set up teams that are currently busy investigating all acts of malfeasance. And there has been a great deal of progress in that regard. And on top of that, we've also bolstered our efforts to protect the nation's assets with regard to ESCOM by deploying soldiers who are protecting our infrastructure installation at various ESCOM power stations. So our focus is to reveal and unearth all these acts of malfeasance. And that is a process that is ongoing. There are teams that are led by top investigators that are doing this work as we speak now. And we continue to want to add more so that we strengthen their capability, so that we leave no room whatsoever for those who have been involved in acts of malfeasance, whether they are inside ESCOM or even outside, whether they are suppliers or providing any service to ESCOM. So that is precisely what we have been involved in. Hence, the success rate that has been made to have more than 5,000 cases that are being investigated and with their participants being involved means that work is being done on an ongoing basis. And I think that is what we should be pleased about. Now, this is a complete departure from what happened in the past. In the past, we either never heard about acts of corruption inside of ESCOM, and wrong things were happening. Now we hear about them, but we don't only hear about them, something is being done about them because of all these acts that are taking place of getting people arrested and getting assets reclaimed and monies being paid back. So progress is being made. And I have a firm belief that we will continue to make progress in this regard. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable the President. Sorry, the third supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable A.M. Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Mr. President, Mr. Derater has made a whole lot of allegations, but to date, despite numerous requests almost from the entire world, no evidence has unfolded thus far, including where he advised us that he informed Minister Godan, and I know you to some extent did respond earlier. Did Mr. Derater ever draw your attention, Mr. President, to any acts of corruption in ESCOM? And or did Minister Godan draw your attention to the statement that Derater makes that he informed Mr. Godan that there's high levels of corruption and senior politicians are involved? I'm asking that so that the public can get a clearer picture whether there's any truth in what we are hearing or not. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Sheikh. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. We have always spoken very publicly and broadly about acts of corruption that have been ongoing in ESCOM. Apart from what has been in the public domain, what was unearthed through the State Capture Commission just added to the stories and the narrative. So that whole process of the aura of, if one can call it aura, or the narrative of corruption has been known from whole contracts to a whole range, but never was information ever put about the personalities that are involved. And hence I say, the process of identification of all that is a matter that should be fully put before the law enforcement agencies. It should be properly investigated so that those who are involved should then be identified and dealt with. The Zondo Commission dealt and identified a number of names, but also felt that further investigation needs to take place. And in this case, where there is identities of people, we say, bring them forward, let those be investigated, and let's have a measure of finality over this. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable the President. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable NLS Wangwa.
President, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You're reminding me of your former colleague, your predecessor rather, who used to come here and say, evaluate his PDP, can't be.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Former President Zuma used to say, evaluate his PDP, can't be. You said you also can't evaluate his PDP. President, the fact of the matter, going back to the North Gauteng High Court judgment, we took you to court, by the way, and we won again. And I think what is important, President, is that it is especially the part where the judgment found that there had been repeated breaches by the state of its constitutional and statutory duties. And these breaches infringed the citizens' rights to healthcare, security, and education. The fact of the matter, President, whether it says with regards to the allegations made by the rate of R1 billion, or in the past where there was an overpayment of suppliers at ESCOM to the tune of R4 billion, or whether it's the coal contracts, whether it's the evergreen contracts, corruption is endemic at ESCOM. The question we want to ask is, should we then not get a firm commitment from government to say that some of the monies recovered in the fight against corruption at ESCOM, including the revenue overruns that we get almost on an annual basis for the past 2 years, should be used or will be used to ensure that hospitals, police stations, and schools are provided with alternative sources of energy, so that you don't have hospitals like Corridor Hospital in the Eastern Cape, where they can sit with a malfunctioning generator for 2 months and some do not even have a generator. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable, the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I did not speak about his pity. Revenue that is raised by the government, as well as monies that are claimed and returned to government, are obviously managed by Treasury. And Treasury, in managing the funds of the nation, has to take into consideration a whole range of matters. And primary in their consideration is the welfare of the people of South Africa. How best that money can be utilized and deployed. And they, in doing so, will look at various balancing acts that they need to embark upon. The issue of, say, alternative power sources for hospitals, for schools, and a whole range of other places, including places where food is manufactured, are matters that have to be decided on a case-by-case basis. It has to be what you need to take into account, how much power does a hospital need, and what type of, say, alternative source of energy does it need. And that is why we say it cannot be a one-size-fits-all, just a whole scale right across the board. Because if you were to do so, then you would be inadvertently causing enormous problems for the entire grid of the country by trying to solve one particular problem. So one needs to always think about the consequences of each action that we take. And so therefore, in the end, in managing the, say, if you like, for lack of a better word, the allocation of the energy that should be managed by an ESCOM through their energy management center, they look at all that, how much energy should be allocated to this region. And when they do so, they also look at special areas like hospitals and a number of areas like that. So matter of how the fiscus would be able to distribute that, the overruns, as well as distributing monies claimed. I would not be able to respond to that because it is a money management matter that has to be managed by the Treasury themselves. And as I said, they take a whole number of consideration into account. But maybe a good thought that should be thought about. But you will find that all that has a number of other needs. If there ever is, an overrun of revenue, they will tell you that we already have an allocated area where the money should be deployed. But thank you very much for raising that.
I thank you, the Honorable the President. Question number 9 has been asked by the Honorable KRJ Mishwe. The Honorable the President.
Honorable Speaker and honorable members, the pledges made by the International Partners Group, comprising of the United States of America, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and the European Union to support South Africa's just energy transition with around $8.5 billion in financing is on track. In 2022, South Africa formulated the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, which sets out the scale of investment needed to meet the country's international carbon emissions reduction commitments. The pledges made by the International Partners Group towards this investment are contained in this investment plan that was presented here and published. These pledges consist of a combination of concessional, grants, as well as commercial loans, and guarantees as well. Work is underway to have these funds properly deployed. Financing under the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan will not be used for investment in coal-fired power stations. International climate financing is for investments that transition economies away from the use of fossil fuels. The bulk of the financing is for the energy sector, including the decommissioning of those power stations that have reached the end of their life. It is also for repurposing and repowering of identified coal power stations in line with South Africa's decommissioning schedule. It also includes support for new generation capacity, investments in the transmission grid, and strengthening the distribution network. Importantly, funds have been allocated to just transition interventions that will support vulnerable workers, reskill, train, and provide new diversified economic opportunities and jobs for workers and communities affected by the transition. Now, a number of role players are in the course of dotting the I's, crossing the T's in relation to all this. And a number of interventions are now underway to ensure that this plan is actualized. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable the President. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable K.R.J. Mishwe.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable President, a number of European countries are buying coal from South Africa, while we lack coal that is clean and that can be used to power our generators. And there are some that have postponed their scheduled closures of their coal power plants. This, while South Africa is steaming ahead with decommissioning our coal power plants to appease leaders that are disregarding the devastating effects of load shedding on local businesses and costing our economy thousands of jobs that also leads to poverty. My question to you, Mr. President, is whether you know any European country that has been coerced or instructed to transition much quicker. And for me, the word much quicker is telling, much quicker from relying on coal plants, or did South Africa volunteer to take that risk that we believe will have devastating effects on our economy? We know that China, that is by far the largest coal consuming country, accounts for 53% of global demand. And India is the second coal consuming country. Are they also being told to transition much quicker, as South Africa has been told to transition much quicker? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mishwe. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Mishwe, we were not told. No, we were not told.
Thank you.
What the process we've been involved in.
Now you can talk, because now I can listen.
We have been involved in an inclusive process, and it did not start a year or 2 years ago. We are a participant in various international initiatives, starting from the United Nations, culminating in the various Conference of Parties, COPs, started with COP 20, 21, 26, and all that. Of our own volition, we then said as a nation, climate change is a reality, and we see its devastating impact. We, like other nations, have to make our own decision and contribution to ensuring that we lower climate change. And we came out with our own national determination. Even before I set up the Presidential Climate Commission, processes were underway, led by a variety of South Africans as well, non-governmental organizations, and even this whole parliament was also in the various committees involved in discussions. But let me tell you another concern. We are the biggest emitter on the continent. We are obviously the biggest and the most industrialized nation, but we are the biggest emitter. And more than 80% of our energy emanates from fossil fuels. So as we emit all these fumes.
Honorable Volmarans, will you mute your system? Proceed, Honorable President.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mishwe, 2-3 weeks ago, I had the occasion to listen to experts at the Presidential Climate Change Commission. And a professor in health and various respiratory diseases told us the impact of emissions is having on the health of a number of...
No, Honorable Member, please take him off. Will you please remove Honorable Volmarans from the system? Order. Maniman, order. Honorable the President, proceed.
I thought for a minute, Honorable Speaker, that you wanted me to dance. So this professor was telling us about the impact of the emissions and the way they are affecting the health of South Africans. And that in many ways brought home the message about climate change and our contribution. And it's a matter that we may think that we should not care about, but when you begin to think about the many South Africans who are either dying and suffering from various diseases rather, of a respiratory nature, and they then ascribe it to the emissions, we have to sit up and take notice. But apart from that, we have never been compelled to take the decisions that we have taken. We took these decisions on our own volition. But having done so, we have also said we are going to proceed to cleaner energy, and we will do it at our own that we will do it at our own pace and at our own time. What we've also said now recently, and this has been starkly put forward to us by Minister Ramaphosa, who in his very good diagnostic work, having gone to all our power stations, came up with a very clear message that the process of installing the renewables that we are working on is going to take quite a longish time. And in the course of doing so, we should also look at the timetable of the decommissioning process. And Honorable Mishwe, decommissioning is something that we cannot run away from, because power stations have a life cycle. There is no power station that will go on for 50 years and 100 years. Even the one that you think can go on beyond 50 years, you have to keep on repairing it, and the cost of repairing that power station may in the end be much bigger than the cost of getting renewables. And as it ages, its capability and ability to generate power starts decreasing. And we are saying the timetable and the schedule for doing so has to be relooked. And Minister Ramaphosa has come up with a very convincing story, which is now leading us to saying, let us relook at the whole process of decommission without abandoning our commitment to move to cleaner energy. So we have to do both in tandem. And nobody is forcing us to speed up the process. Because when these power stations age, Honorable Meshwe, they age and they become, it's like an old car. An old car becomes a guzzler, like old people. becomes a guzzler, and it becomes more and more difficult for you to operate it. So nobody is compelling us to speed up that process, and we are saying we are taking our own conditions and circumstances into account. And even those partners, we are making it very clear to them that in the end, the jet plan has to take into account our own situation. And we've got to secure our energy security throughout that whole process. So we will do what we as South Africans have to do. What they do in Europe, Honorable Meshwe, is their business. We look at ourselves. Because we are a sovereign nation, we must look at our own interests, not at the interests of Europe and other countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable the President. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable N. Gancho.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable President, it is evident that our government is committed to just energy transition and ensuring that no one is left behind. And this can be seen in the work being done by the Presidential Climate Change Commission. Given the high cost of transitioning from coal to clean energy sources and the need to ensure that our country meets our goals of net zero emissions by 2030 in terms of our nationally determined contribution. Mr. President, what are the challenges that government faces in terms of ensuring that the energy transition does not impact negatively on our economy, and that the interest of all relevant stakeholders are taken into account? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Gancho. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Gancho, thank you very much for that question, because what you are raising is precisely what the Presidential Climate Change Commission is working on. And it is doing it in quite an admirable way, in that it is consulting with various stakeholders throughout our country, but they've also focused on areas that have many of our coal mines and power stations. And we have insisted that they must consult in a broad and thorough manner. They've got labor involved, they've got community-based organizations, and many other organizations that deal with the lives of our people, including business. And in doing so, we are guided by one principle, that as we transit from fossil fuels to cleaner energy and move towards our national determined contribution by 2030, as we have said, we leave no one behind. But we've also made it clear that, for instance, and I've made it very clear to even global leaders, I've said we've just built 2 mega power stations and spent a great deal of money in building those. They are the newest fleet that one could say there is in the world. And we are not going to be just shutting down Kusile and Medupi. We are going to proceed towards clean energy whilst taking into account, as I said earlier, our own circumstances. And those circumstances have to deal with how do we transit? Are we going to leave certain people behind? Are we going to leave, a landscape that's filled with workers who have lost their jobs, either in coal mines or power stations? Or are we going to have a just transition? And we've argued that we are committed to a just transition. And a just transition should mean that everyone is involved right across the board. But the other important thing that we need to look at is how, through this process, we can create new industries. We can create hydrogen jobs. We can create clean energy alliances.